called you up to tell you that I'd be late. We drove my truck down the gravel road to the old boxcar. There was no light when we pulled in, so we built a fire in an old garbage bin. Do you remember? Do you remember? We opened the door to take a look inside. You were holding my arm with all of your might. It was a little dusty and dirty with very little light. I thought it was way out of sight. Do you remember? Do you remember? There was an old couch against the far wall. I held you close so you would not fall. It looked like you had some fear in your eyes. I think you were afraid of what I would try. Do you remember? Do you remember? I put my hand on your trembling knee, but you kept pushing me away. But as time went on, you began to respond. The want in your eyes took me by surprise. So I put out the light so we could hold each other tight. Do you remember? Do you remember? Your tender kiss and the touch of your skin would make it hard for this night to end. We both began to feel that we could not wait. Even though it was our first date. Do you remember? 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 Do